Hi, my name is Kevin Flanagan. I'm the Manager of Technical Consulting here at RSA, the Security Division of EMC. And today, I'm going to talk to you about data loss prevention. And before I talk about data loss prevention, let's talk about how data loss happens in the first place. So in many organizations, they take their highly sensitive data, whether it's intellectual property, maybe some sensitive regulated data like payment card data, personally identifiable information, and they might put it in a handful of databases or in some applications. And what they do is they lock that down, restrict it with strong authentication, maybe access controls or other types of controls to protect the information within this database or application. But what happens during the normal course of business is that people need to interact with that data. And these people might be someone inside of operations who comes in and uses this data to maybe fulfill some orders. And when they're fulfilling those orders, maybe what they do is take that information and move it out to file shares. Well, those file shares aren't as protected as that database was. And then maybe what happens is somebody inside of, say, the customer support organization also takes a look at either this data or they get it from the file shares. They might take their laptop or their desktop machine and copy that sensitive content to something like a USB device that's removable, or they might print that information out and leave it in places that are outside of your control, or they might burn it to CDs. Then maybe what happens is maybe somebody inside of the IT organization takes that information, maybe perhaps they put it on a public internet-facing website, or they send it to Gmail or Hotmail or Yahoo Mail or any one of those type of web applications that are publicly facing outside of your control. And then perhaps maybe somebody inside of HR or legal takes some of that information and maybe they either accidentally or maybe perhaps on purpose send that email out to somebody that perhaps they shouldn't be sending that information to. Now, what we just looked at is data loss prevention, or not data loss prevention, but data loss. And what happens during this data leakage is that information that you as an organization have the ownership of, it's actually now in the possession of people without the access controls that it had within your internal organization. So it's in places that you don't necessarily control. So how do you block that? Well, today, most organizations stop or do their best at preventing data loss by putting policies in place. So some of those policies that they might put in place are, say, a data classification policy, which describes what types of data the organization uses on a daily basis. What information is sensitive? What information is classified? What information is public? And along with that, in many cases, organizations put policies in place that describe things like acceptable use of that information. The problem with these policies is that these policies aren't enforceable. They aren't in the minds of the people inside of the organization on their daily basis when they do their normal jobs. So the question is, how can you take these policies and make them living inside of the organization? So what you can do is basically, as these users are trying to copy that information to file shares, take action on that. So some of the actions that we can take with the RSA DLP suite are things like if someone's trying to copy that to a USB drive, perhaps you can just block the copying. Maybe you can go and look at something like a file share and force a user to do something like justify why they are copying it to that sensitive location. With email, maybe you can do something like say, I'm going to encrypt that data that's sensitive. And you do this selectively. You don't do it to all. You do it based on the sensitivity of that content. So normal data that's not sensitive, fine, it can go on USB drives. But that which is sensitive by your data classification policy, that we're going to make sure that we put the appropriate controls on. So you can block, justify. If it's something like email, perhaps we can go out and quarantine that email. And there's other controls in place and other enforcement mechanisms that you can put in place. But this layer that you put in your infrastructure and in the machines within your organization, this is the DLP technology. And there's multiple ways to implement this technology, and this technology can actually be built into stuff that you already own. Microsoft Rights Management, Cisco IronPort, EMC, and several other types of technology that this can work with. However, the problem isn't the technology. the technology is not what's creating the data loss. What's creating the data loss problem is people. So that's where RSA is different. What RSA does is take different approaches to be able to solve the DLP problem, not only with the technology, but with a suite of solutions and services and the knowledge to be able to solve this data loss problem and make these policies living and breathing within your organization. And there's 3 ways that we do that. The number 1 way that we do that is we take a business or a user-centered approach to solving this problem. So we look at what your business needs from a data loss prevention problem, and we only enforce the necessary policies to make business work as it should, but reduce the risk within your organization. So we look at things like who the users are and what that acceptable use policy is and what the data classification policy is, which brings me to my next 2 points of what we do better than anybody else. The second part is accuracy. If you are not accurately going out and understanding with a high degree of accuracy that the sensitive content is indeed sensitive, and you're blocking data that isn't sensitive, or you're quarantining, or you're forcing users through hoops that they shouldn't necessarily go through because the information is basically public information, you're really not going to educate these users, or you're not going to influence their behavior. So what you need to do is make sure that your solution that you implement from a data loss prevention technology standpoint is highly accurate. So what do we do there? We have a team of individuals called our knowledge engineering team that's responsible for understanding what sensitive data looks like. And they build that knowledge into the product itself. No one else has this capability to be able to accurately identify sensitive information. So once you've accurately identified that data, you need to make it relevant to these business users and the users within your organization. And the way you make that relevant is by applying context. Context based on the identities, based on the method in which this information is leaving. So if customer service is allowed to send emails with sensitive content out to the end users, maybe you just audit that action. But if someone inside of IT were to do that, you want to block that. So the risk is different based on the organization. And the RSA DLP suite has the ability to tie into existing data structures that you have that define your organization to be able to apply that context. So to summarize, by taking an approach that looks not only at the technology that you can implement inside your infrastructure and hopefully in stuff that you already have, but also takes into account your business and what your business needs are, looks at the accuracy of that information. How accurately can I identify that information? And then looking at context. Are we looking at how we can actually go in and prevent data loss and create a sustainable and consistent data loss prevention program? So I hope this was helpful. Thank you.